Ladies and gentlemen, these are the best episodes of SpongeBob in each of the 14 seasons. After awarding our winning nominees, we'll rank them against each other and determine the champion season of SpongeBob. Now, without further ado, grab some popcorn and let's dive in. For season 1, there's obviously a lot of solid contenders for the best episode. Between Help Wanted, Pizza Delivery, and Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost, the competition's tight. I think though I gotta give it to Pickles. This episode hits really hard since it does well on a variety of accounts. Its jokes are solid and original, the storyline is entertaining to watch. It even has a banger of a soundtrack in the middle when Mr. Krabs is training SpongeBob on making Krabby Patties. This dynamic in particular is something special in this episode. Especially in later seasons, often Mr. Krabs comes across as just overly critical and greedy with his employees, but this is a time where he uncharacteristically actually cares about SpongeBob. Finally, another strong component of this episode is the antagonist. Bubble Bass has an extremely punchable face, so seeing SpongeBob outdo him in the end of the episode is awesome. Moving on to season 2, we're really spoiled with choice here. A lot of the best episodes in SpongeBob in general come from this season, so picking a number 1 is going to be challenging. Overall though, 2 episodes in particular stand a bit higher than the rest. Band Geeks and Dying for Pie. These 2 episodes are both legendary, since they don't mess with the jokes at all and heavily feature peak Squidward. Picking between the 2 is extremely hard, since it's like picking between your own children. But honestly, even though the bulk of both of these episodes is near perfection, the ending of one takes a clear lead. And of course, it's Band Geeks. Band Geeks is probably the most common favorite episode in the whole show, with even Tom Kenny citing it as his favorite. But it's for good reason. Band Geeks just doesn't miss. It starts off with Squidward assembling a band, and the whole episode is their training. Jokes fly left and right, and we get to see nearly all of the main cast and side characters in one room, so unexpected interactions lead to some entertaining screen time. But the thing that really sets this episode apart is the finale. Oh my gosh, man, with one of, if not the best songs in SpongeBob, Sweet Victory, being performed at the Bubble Bowl, plus some cool character development while expanding the universe via new locations and a charming new mainstay character, Squilly and Fancy Son. This episode was great, and the ending was awesome. Squidward finally getting his victory is extremely satisfying, since it's not at his friend's expense and felt very unifying between the characters, having even Plankton feel like part of the group. Band Geeks definitely earns the number 1 spot for season 2. Moving on to season 3, this once again is considered tied for the best season of SpongeBob overall, so picking a best episode for season 3 is going to be pretty tough. Snowball Effect, Chocolate with Nuts, and the Krusty Krab training video are probably my top 3 picks here. Overall, I gotta give it to the Krusty Krab training video for best overall episode. Even though SpongeBob doesn't exactly have a rinse and repeat formula to each episode, this episode still manages to completely break the format for how SpongeBob episodes usually work. With a fun narrator, good gags, and originality, this episode was really an instant classic. Adding lore to the Krusty Krab and Mr. Krabs himself was a strong choice not only for the episode, but the whole SpongeBob universe. Also, the positive energy in this episode really made me want to work at the Krusty Krab as a kid. And even as an adult, there are a lot of jokes that just hit well.
Mr. Krabs, can I have a raise?
No. Good job, Mr. SquarePants.
Overall, the Krusty Krab training video had this awesome energy throughout the entirety of the episode. So for that, it earns the number 1 spot of season 3. Going on to season 4, we notice a steep decline in the batting average for these episodes. While beforehand in an entire season, there'd only really be 1 or 2 duds like I'm with Stupid or Grandma's Kisses, this season had a lot of mediocrity. Even so though, this season still had the seasoning. With a handful of goated episodes rivaling classic SpongeBob, I gotta place Krusty Towers as the king of season 4. In this episode, Mr. Krabs converts the Krusty Krab into a hotel. It has everything a perfect SpongeBob episode has: a flawless stream of humor, solid world expansion, and good character dialogue. Something really weird is, this is essentially a Squidward torture episode done right. Normally those types of episodes are really bad, but right here though, I think what really makes it work is the fact that he doesn't just simply lose the entirety of the episode from start to finish. Instead, even though Squidward starts off being mistreated, he ends up being able to use the plaque to his own advantage and turns the tables on Mr. Krabs. Additionally, I gotta say that the real star of this episode was Patrick. I used to love Patrick as a kid, but because of seasonal rot, he got really bad over the years. He got less and less entertaining and more annoying. It almost makes it hard to enjoy Patrick at all, even looking back on these classic episodes, but just because of how funny he is in this particular episode, I still find I like his on-screen presence. If you stop and think about it, what really makes this episode special is the peak character dialogue. It just feels really great having everybody on screen. That's something that's really hard to achieve, and the fact that this episode did it makes it hard not to love it. Anyways, moving on though, if season 4 started the descent of SpongeBob quality, season 5 straight up nosedived off a cliff compared to the original legendary SpongeBob. There's only a couple of episodes that pass with an A, and the majority of the rest are just forgettable. They also started leaning more into gross out humor, which I myself have never liked. That all said though, season 5 really gave us a solid spy episode with Spy Buddies. In this episode, Mr. Krabs is suspicious of Plankton forming a plan, so he gets SpongeBob and Patrick to spy on him and figure out what he's up to. Spy Buddies Buddies really stood out from the rest of season 5 a lot because of its whimsical approach to the humor, and it overall just felt pretty different in the style of writing. Spy Buddies isn't some drawn out special or some uninspired gimmick episode. It's just fun. The people making it clearly had a good time, and it radiates off of the episode. It just has this good energy about it the whole way through. Overall, I gotta say, hey, this is Spy Buddies. It's clearly the peak of season 5. If you haven't seen this episode before, I gotta recommend it. There's tons of fun gadgets. I really enjoyed this episode. Let's go on to season 6. Season 6 began airing in 2008 and was overall an improvement on season 5. It still had its weaknesses, like too many forgettable specials, but many of the episodes felt more creative, even if they varied in how well executed they were. For me, the peak of season 6 boils down to two almost equally strong choices: Grandpappy the Pirate and Sandcastles in the Sand. Grandpappy the Pirate expands the universe more and gives us a cool one-off character, Mr. Krab's granddad. It's pretty funny, and it's fun seeing the Krusty Krab in pirate ship form. It does feel a bit slow from time to time, but I still enjoy it overall for sure. Sandcastles in the Sand almost feels like a short with its premise of just being a fight with sandcastles, but it manages to be entertaining the whole time and did a solid job with physical comedy humor. Overall, I think these two are nearly tied, but I barely have to give the #1 spot for season 6 to Sandcastles in the Sand, since it managed to be entertaining the whole way through. It's kind of random, but Sandcastles in the Sand is really unique in that it is the peak of SpongeBob action. This episode's really cool to watch because it starts off just on a small scale, right? But as it goes on, it keeps on getting bigger and bigger and a larger scale. Eventually they get to where they're having fighter jets and guns and rockets and all sorts of stuff. Plus, unlike a lot of SpongeBob action, you actually get to see the action. So there's no cartoon tornado or something like that. You actually get to see the fighting. They keep you on your toes on who's gonna win, so that makes it far more engaging compared to most cartoons. I think it's a really good episode overall for this reason alone. All right, let's move on to season 7. Season 7 felt pretty similar to season 6 overall as far as quality goes, and I think the #1 episode for it is pretty obvious: Cracked Crabs. I didn't actually know the name of this episode until I looked it up, but this is the one where Mr. Krabs meets with a bunch of his other cheap crab friends for a competition to see who's the cheapest at a hotel somewhere. I really enjoyed this episode since it felt fresh, and the gags generally hit well, the dialogue was solid, plus the premise of a competition for cheapness among other crabs was original. It expanded the Sponge universe a bit, and it was interesting to see SpongeBob feel moral conflict between doing what he personally believes and listening to Mr. Krabs. I always appreciate this kind of stuff since it lets you see the characters from multiple angles. Cracked Crabs definitely earns the #1 spot for season 7. You know, a lot of the middle era SpongeBob specials have been kind of boring, but season 8's best episode in my opinion, oddly enough, is actually a special, Frozen Face-Off. I remember not really liking this episode as a kid, but I really grew to appreciate it. Looking back on it, it was pretty fun and featured most of the main cast in a natural way. In this episode, some anonymous millionaire, Plankton, hosts a town-wide competition where the winner of a snow sled race gets tons of money. The whole town rushes to participate and win the gold, but Plankton secretly uses this as a chance to steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula while Mr. Krabs and the gang are all away. This episode had some memorable moments, like the Adam scene, and I feel like it's really underappreciated since it's such a fun episode. The pacing was decent overall, and considering the lackluster other options in season 8, I really think that Frozen Face-Off might just be the best one in it. Hopefully season 9 will see a better batting average. Season 9 really felt like a transition season, coming out in 2012 and introducing a whole new screen size for the entire season. And on top of that, the writing and animation started feeling pretty different too. Animation-wise, the animators began favoring more exaggerated expressions, and the writing had more episodes feel like they're aimed towards young children. Like most newer seasons, it really doesn't match old-school SpongeBob in the slightest in my opinion, with most episodes tending to be pretty mediocre at best and infuriating at worst, but a couple episodes are decent at least, the best of which is Licensed to Milkshake. I like how this episode is semi-loosely written around a one-off piece of old SpongeBob lore, where he randomly presented his milkshake operator license in an older episode. And I think that they converted it into a fun episode overall with a solid one-off character, Captain Frosty Mug. Between the fresh approach with the military training parody and a few good gags, overall I find this episode pretty solid. The dialogue may be a bit weak and it isn't particularly quotable per se, but it's the best of the season though, so Licensed to Milkshake takes the #1 spot for season 9. Something really unique about season 10 is that it is the shortest season of SpongeBob and it only has 10 pairs of episodes. Personally, I'm glad they chose to do this because this whole season feels a little higher quality than season 9 in my opinion. But even so though, it's not a huge gap. I think if you ask me what the best episode overall for season 10 is, I'd have to say Life Insurance. This episode humorously shows SpongeBob and Patrick misinterpret what life insurance is, and they think it makes them completely invincible. Therefore, this whole episode is essentially slapstick physical humor and jokes where they try to prove to Squidward that they can't take damage. It's better than the rest of the season since it feels a bit less babyish, but it still isn't particularly memorable. Moving on to season 11. In my opinion, the best episode of season 11 easily passes the past several best episodes, since it has a really cool art style and is more memorable. The episode I'm talking about is Squid Noir. Squid Noir has everything in black and white as SpongeBob and Squidward team up to solve a mystery, really leaning into that 1940s detective style. The whole episode is fun and felt very different from anything else we had seen in a long time, and I wish they would do more stuff like this. Overall, it easily earns season 11's #1 spot, and I don't really want to spoil it, I would just say, go check it out. Squid Noir is a fun time. We've been dealing with a lot of mediocrity recently, but I gotta say, season 12 is aggressively forgettable. The show at this point has completely shifted its target demographic from young teens and older kids to young children and toddlers. There's really nothing worth recommending, and even the best episode, Dream Hoppers, is essentially just a ripoff of that season 1 episode where they jump through dreams as well. This episode isn't that great. The most unique thing about it is the fact that there's no dialogue. I mean, you know that reef blower episode thing from episode 2 of SpongeBob? I mean, I guess if you really liked that, then this is a long version of that. I really don't see who's gonna really like this episode a ton, but it has good visuals, so for that reason it kinda beats out most of the other episodes. I liked the giant Squidward, for example. I mean, moving on though, there's really not much to say about this episode in my opinion. As for season 13, I think the best episode is probably Swimming Fools. We've seen a gradual shift towards Tom and Jerry or Looney Tunes style sound effects, and now this episode especially makes a sharp lean towards that. The episode is about SpongeBob making a pool and Squidward wanting to go into it since it's hot outside, but not wanting SpongeBob to know he wants to go in. He ends up sneaking into the pool at nighttime and fantasizes for a while before it all crashes on him. The show at this point really lacks meaningful dialogue ever and tries to be appealing more through nice animation and slapstick. But it really isn't great and it's not very funny, so let's just move on to season 14. Man, it's kind of hard to be this negative consistently, but I don't want to sugarcoat it. I mean, newer SpongeBob just simply isn't nearly as good as the original stuff. So, anyways though, the final season as of now, season 14, has one episode that I think takes the cake pretty clearly overall. Squiddiot Box. Now, I don't normally care for references galore to old SpongeBob. You know, a nod here, an Easter egg there, that sort of thing is fine. So it's a bit surprising that I find this episode to be the best of the season overall, since the whole thing is a sequel episode to Idiot Box. But the bar is in the floor. Since this episode is pretty adventurous and expands the universe a bit, even with its couple low points here and there, I gotta say it's the best I've seen in season 14, so it gets the spot. Squiddiot Box overall is #1 for season 14. But yeah, 14 seasons, that's all of SpongeBob. What's really cool looking over all this is the fact that each season has its own distinct identity, in my opinion. Season 1 had a lot more adult humor and an older animation style. It really felt like they're still finding their groove with what they wanted to do. Season 2 had newer animation and they confidently found their niche, leaned into the style of humor that a lot of people associate with classic SpongeBob, you know? Season 3, I think, was kind of similar to Season 2 overall, but maybe it had a bit more distinction in the episodes. They had more specials and stuff. Season 4, this came out after the movie, so they had a new writing crew since Steven Hillenburg wanted the show to stop, but it felt oddly similar to Season 1 in a way since they were still finding their groove since it had a new writing crew. Season 5 felt rushed and saw lots of short episodes and experimentation. It started leaning pretty heavily into gross out humor, and I didn't really care for that. Season 6 was pretty similar to 5, but upped the quality a decent bit. Season 7 was a pair with Season 6. Kind of like Season 2 and 3 are a match, Season 6 and 7 are kind of a match. Season 8, even though you could consider it a trio in a way with Season 6 and 7 since it had a lot of the same styles, because you could tell the writers were running lower on steam, I think of it as pretty distinct from the other two. Overall, Season 8 was kind of like the bookend for the middle era of SpongeBob, with Season 9 really transitioning into the modern SpongeBob. Season 9 felt more fresh compared to Season 8, and it really acted as that transition season, like I was saying, from middle era to late era SpongeBob. It had a new screen size and a different approach to the writing. Season 10 was the shortest season there was, but it felt like it was a little bit higher quality than Season 9 overall. And Seasons 11 and 12 are the tipping points where it really started feeling like it was leaning towards young kids. From Season 12 to 14, it was more or less the same, just each season having more exaggerated animation and less emphasis on witty dialogue. It's kind of weird how SpongeBob feels like an entirely different show depending on which season you picked. Anyways, now that we picked a best episode for each season, let's put them up against each other and see how they fare. In the bottom at number 14, we have Season 12's Dream Hoppers. Didn't like it? Let's move on. For number 13, appropriately, we have Season 13's Swimming Fools. Number 12 is Season 10's Life Insurance, and at number 11 we get Season 14's Squiddy-It box. For number 10 we have Season 9's License to Milkshake, and for number 9 we have Season 8's Frozen Face-Off. For number 8 we have Season 7's Cracked Crabs, and coming in the upper half of the list at number 7 we have Season 6's Sandcastles in the Sand. At number 6 we have Season 11's Squid Noir, and number 5 is appropriately Season 5's Spy Buddies. Number 4 is where it starts to get hard to rank as we're talking about peak SpongeBob here. Honestly, number 4 and 3 could flip depending on the day you ask me, but as much as I love Pickles from Season 1, I think it slides into the number 4 spot. For number 3, we have the goated Krusty Towers episode from Season 4, and the number 2 spot is the Krusty Krab training video from Season 3. Finally, for the number 1 spot, the king of SpongeBob seasoning, Season 2's Band Geeks. I think this all breaks down into 3 categories. The top 4 of these in particular are all peak SpongeBob episodes that really rock and have tons of great moments. And the ones in the middle I think are worth watching overall, and I find them pretty easy to enjoy. The bottom stuff, hey, don't waste your time, I wouldn't recommend watching it personally. But yeah, thank you guys for watching this video. I hope y'all enjoyed it. If you did, please drop a like. It took a lot of time and love to make this video happen. Hope to see y'all next time.